What's up, Internet? You're tuning in to episode 88 of the FlipScreen Games Podcast, a weekly video game podcast where three best buds from different nations come together to discuss the wide world of video games. I'm your host, Pete and Bessie, joined as always by my very good friends and co-hosts, Mr. Stephen Radford.
On my mark.
Mr. Max Wright.
Ahoy. Sorry, you've really...
So I'm gonna park the kimono here for a second. Every time that we sit down to record, right, we have to hit record twice. We have our backup starter and then our actual when the show is gonna start. And every time I count it down, I say on my mark, 3, 2, 1, and that's when we start our backup recording. And for the last 2 weeks, we've been throwing Max off. You say any form of that after that, he just freezes. And Steve, you caught him with his pants down on the air, and I gotta say,
it's because it makes me rush to hit record, and obviously I've closed it at this point because I'm already recording. So I'm like,
Yeah, if you follow Max on Twitter, what's your Twitter name, Max?
At Max Elbright.
Go tweet him on my mark. Just please, everyone, do that right now.
Oh my God!
Just pause
Let's
this and go over to Twitter and just tweet Max on my mark.
Don't
everybody in the Discord. Just going at Max Elbright.
No, because I'll get them now. You've made me turn on my Discord notifications. I'll get those.
I know,
now.
so do it.
It's gonna be like,
yeah.
I'm gonna be in my sleep, like, please,
Bing, bing, bing.
no, on my mark, no.
All right, Steve. Here's the next prank. We got to get in touch with Max's partner, who I don't know how visible she is on the internet, so I'm not going to say her name, but we'll get her to start whispering it in his ear after he's fallen asleep.
Oh God!
And see what we can
God.
get. You know,
I just start
just have like
around.
a tape, put the headphones on, and it just says like on my mark, on repeat, just on repeat, constantly for hours. That's all you hear.
Man, then like he starts to stir, she pulls the headphones off, he sits up in a cold sweat, she pulls over, pretends to be asleep.
What you've done here is you've made a gross error because I'm not on tomorrow's or Wednesday's show whenever you record Nintendo Noise. You could have organised this then. And then I would have no idea what's happening when all of a sudden I start getting.
Yeah, but now you won't even like think that this is possible. You'll be like, oh, they've already revealed that.
You're like, what a funny joke. Well, those guys are such jokers.
Yeah.
I love throwaway things that never come back. I love that. Then it just becomes my arc.
Hey, that's how we roll on this show. Speaking of which, we're back. It's the FlipScreen Games Podcast, everybody. We got some video games to talk about. We got some breaking news to kick the show off today. Just as we were about to sit down, we got the news that a group of workers at Sega of America are moving to Unionize. And it is pretty, I mean, obviously, you know, as a bunch of gamers who are pro-union, any employees union is something that we get excited about, but this is a particularly interesting story because this is going to be the organization is called the Allied Employees Guild Improving Sega, or AGIS, and it is going to be the first video game union in the United States that is made up of multiple different departments. Because of course, you know, as you know, if you're a longtime listener of the show, there have been a few other unions at, you know, Activision Blizzard. There are 3 different unions, I believe, or 2, and then one that was unsuccessful. And then ZeniMax also has one, but they've all been spearheaded and made up of solely QA departments previously. And Aegis is interesting because it's going to have folks from, they did specify which ones it was. It is from the brand marketing, games as a service, localization, marketing services, PD ops, product development, and quality assurance teams. So that's everybody almost, right? That's folks from every arm of the business getting involved in this union. So really a huge development. And I want to read a little bit more about it and let them speak for themselves and talk about why they formed this union and what the point is. But just to get you guys off the bench, Steve, let's start with you. Initial reactions to the story.
Oh, phenomenal news. Like I'm very pro-union. I've always been fascinated by America's fear of unions because they are pretty commonplace in the UK, I would say. I don't know if you agree with that, Max, but everywhere, every like big organization I've worked for has had a union. Even when I worked like a supermarket, they had a union.
I'd love to briefly contextualize it for the Europeans in the audience that we were historically a very pro-union country until we very much weren't, and you can thank Ronald Reagan for uh, as well as a number of his cohorts. So yeah, we're hitting a historical 60-year high in strength and belief in unions in America. So it seems like we may be hitting a turning point here in my country.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I hope so. It seems like carry on, Max.
sorry, I was just going to say that I agree with that. That it's huge, and the fact that it's the whole of Sega of America as well means not only does that mean that Japan has to start taking notice, and that other Japanese companies that have US branches like Nintendo and that will have to, if they aren't already, start taking notice. Also, the fact that it's company wide means these businesses that already have unions for, like you say, for like the QA teams. Can start, using the precedent has now been set that now they can start. Okay, cool. Let's roll everyone else in. Everyone else can get the benefits. We all deserve this, and they all get it. And it's only a net positive for the industry, really.
Yeah,
Excuse
you're
me.
right. I mean, the ability to like have a template of success that you can follow and potentially you know, uh similar partners, right? Because again, to give you a little bit more context here, right? I'll give you the pull quote we have here. Workers at Sega of America's Irvine, California office have filed for a union election with the National Labor Relations Board, the NLRB. The new union, which, as I said, is the Allied Employees Guild Improving Sega, AGIS, is partnered with the Communications Workers of America, the CWA, which is one of the biggest creative unions in America, and consists of a supermajority of 144 employees across Sega's QA, localization, live service, all these departments that I said before, making this the first video game union in the United States made up of workers across numerous departments. So
And it's specifically the CWA's code initiative, the campaign to organize digital employees, which also I think teamed up with the workers at Raven when they unionized. So it's the same union that they're affiliated with.
And again, right? Like the reason I think that that's important is, there is like this precedent set here, right? Of this organization, like, coming together and doing this, right? And setting this template for others to follow, but also like they have the ability, I think, to probably go to these organizations that have worked with Aegis and replicate that success, and be like, okay, hey, like we saw how this worked at Sega, let's do this here, right? Whether that's at Nintendo or PlayStation or wherever.
You think
Huge
that's
opportunity.
how this goes? You think this is then going to open up the floodgates because they've put together on their Twitter account, which is takes ages if you want to take a look, kind of a list of, I guess, things that they're working towards, including better pay, better conditions, those kind of things. But I'll let you go into details on that, Pete. But do you think this opens up the floodgates when people see that this works? Because we kind of saw that happen in the new media, right? It was I think
Yeah.
it was initially BuzzFeed News that unionized, and then we saw Gawker Media unionize, and then um, they managed to get Vox Media to unionize as well. So we saw all of those kind of new media outlets unionize around a similar time. Do you think we'll see something similar happen with video game developers in America?
I think it seems pretty likely, yeah, because I think often, I think, and this is just my personal opinion, but I think when it comes to a lot of things like this, like the idea of strong unions, right? The way that these things happen is through example, right? And it's the reason that people feel like things like this can't happen is because they've been conditioned to think that they don't work and that they can't happen through propaganda, right? And when you have examples of your peers who were able to organize and fight for something better and win, I think that's really emboldening and empowering. And I think particularly if you are someone who can then be like, okay, we're going to go and partner with the same organizations, right? Like with uh uh the CWA, right? And like go and be like, hey, like how did you help Aegis get a union off the ground? How do we elect a board? How do we go to our superiors and ask that they recognize our union? Like there are resources that can help folks start a
At this
union in their
point,
workplace. And
do they need to ask for it to be recognized? Or if they filed with the NLRB, I would imagine it's
so,
exceeded that point.
yeah, but what happened is they're requesting to be acknowledged, rather
So
than trying to force it. So what'll happen now is either Sega of America will recognize the union and then everything's fine, or they'll have to go through negotiations.
so it could even be that Sega still says no to this, then it becomes more of a fight then, I guess.
Correct. Yeah. So
Interesting,
to pull
okay.
from we saw this story originally break over from Jason Schreier, of course, of Bloomberg, in the Triple Click podcast, and he shared this with a screenshot of a pull quote. And it's it's a press release, right? And it says here, right? Workers have filed for a union representation election with the blah blah blah. We already said this part, and requested voluntary recognition from Sega of America
Okay. All
management.
right.
So the ball's in Sega's court now, whether or not this becomes hostile. If Sega is willing to recognize the union, right, and accept it, and then enter negotiations with the union in good faith, then nothing happens. The union is formed, and that's that, right? And workers at Sega of America have a union. If they deny their request to be recognized, then the Aegis will be required to go to court, and that can
Okay.
play out a multitude of
Honestly,
different
that's
ways.
such a bizarre situation that's how it works.
Yeah,
It's insane to me that and can
it's
Sega then
insane
at
to
some
me too.
point further down the line, can Sega go, "Actually, we've changed our minds, we no longer recognize you, so you're gonna have to take us to court," or if they voluntarily recognize it at this point, or is it at that point they're registered with the NLRB and it's, like, tough?
I want to start by saying that I am not a lawyer. I am not a union rep. I am not an expert, so I could easily be speaking out of turn. My understanding is that yes, once once the employer recognizes the union, then the union is in place, and at that point they have a workers union, and they are entitled to certain rights as a union of workers. That's like
Oh,
how
that's great. Okay.
um you know, a lot of different like industries that have still historically had strong unions, right? Um, like in my country, right, like most, to my knowledge, again, right, any teacher that isn't at a private school is part of a teachers union for the most part. If you go to like a charter school or something like that, it wouldn't be a union job. But like they negotiate your salary, they do all those things like as a collective body.
Or
So that would
actors often are like in as part of union
the
jobs as
SAG
well,
AFTRA
aren't they?
Guild is the Screen Actors Guild, and then that
Mhm.
all AFTRA includes like broadcast media and radio and all those folks as
Yeah,
well.
or the WGA, the Writers Guild of America. I know that
Correct.
they like negotiated quite famously during like the late 2000s
The
for better
writer's
pay and
strike,
better
right?
conditions and things. Yeah.
Yeah. So the steps from here really depend on how Sega of America reacts. But as you said, Steve, we do have statements from them, and I'd love to let the union speak for itself. So we will read from their Twitter thread here, and y'all can hear for yourself why Aegis feels like they need to unionize and what they are seeking to achieve. So they say, today, we, a supermajority of workers at our Sega of America Irvine headquarters, are excited to announce that we are unionizing as the Allied Employees Guild Improving Sega, Aegis, in partnership with CWA, #Unionize Sega. We believe that the passionate, hardworking people at our Irvine offices deserve a say in our working conditions, and we are joining together to advocate for change in our workplace. This is our vision for the path forward. And then that's a tweet, and then there are 4 screenshots that actually have their demands, which, again, it's a little long, but we do think it's right for us to read it out so that they can speak for themselves on this matter. Because, again, like we said, this is a thing which we believe in pretty strongly, and I want to show our support to the folks over at Aegis. So they say, we, the workers of Sega of America, are unionizing as the Allied Employees Guild Improving Sega, Aegis, with the Communications Workers of America, CWA. We are united in our belief that by banding together, we can secure a future where we are empowered to advocate for ourselves and for our colleagues. As employees at Sega, our goal is to create high-quality games and cross-media experiences for our wide, devoted fan base. Our lack of control over our own working conditions has greatly hampered this goal. In the interest of delivering the best quality products to our fans, we must have the opportunity to make decisions that impact our working conditions. We must ensure that Sega remains competitive in a growing industry amidst wages that are below the industry average, weak benefits, and lack of paths to promotion. Unionization is our answer. And they have
Can
that
I
all highlighted. Yeah, Max, go
pause
ahead, jump
there
in.
quickly? I just want to say that to me sounds like Sega is currently probably not a great place to work. I mean, unionization would suggest that anyway, but specifically what they say, they're saying that wages below the industry average, weak benefits, and a lack of past promotion. It sounds like Sega in America, at least, excuse me, sorry, are probably not in a great way right now. But I don't know whether you guys feel like that's reflected in the games. If you notice anything localization wise that maybe there's some issues with it, I don't know if it's something you guys have noticed.
I wouldn't say that it's something I've noticed necessarily in terms of quality of experiences that I've had, but I also think that all it takes, if you go and read Jason Schreier's books, which we reference on this show quite a bit, because I think if you want to learn about game development, they're a great way to learn from the horse's mouth. But even uh, under immense stress and horrid working conditions, people are able to make really incredible, exceptional, beautiful games.
Mhm.
Um, so
I think that doesn't come from the working conditions, though. That comes from people wanting to do their best work
no,
and
I'm not. I'm not
having a passion
justifying it.
for the project.
But
No,
yeah,
yeah,
that's my
100%.
point.
I
Is
get what
I
you're
don't
saying,
think it
but
means
this
that.
is this seems to be a similar reasoning for unionizing over at Ubisoft that we saw when Ubisoft in France was speaking about unionizing. And we're putting the ball is in your court back in Eve's court rather than in their own. But it's interesting though, because this I've just been doing a bit more digging, and this isn't just it's not just Sega of America. It also incorporates Atlas West and presumably some of their other subsidiaries that share an office. The community manager for Atlas West was tweeting that she's joined the union and is pleased to be a part
Fuck
of it.
yeah,
So yeah, it's good to see.
there's power in a union. So we'll go back to Aegis here. So the next slide goes on to say, our workers and our audience deserve games made by people who make a living wage. In our quest to reclaim our collective power, we have built bridges with fellow workers from across our company in an effort to understand our shared issues and those that are unique to each department. As one example, nearly a third of Sega's longtime workers still lack full-time status, paid time off, proper training, or even bereavement leave, despite dedicating years of their lives to Sega. While these issues may affect each department to varying degrees, we come together as a united front and are committed to establishing a culture of equity, diversity, and open communication. Together, we will ensure fair treatment for all employees, regardless of position. I got
I
goosebumps reading
think
that. I love that.
I think at some point that and obviously this is not the place for that discussion really. America needs to look at their laws and kind of make this kind of shit illegal. In the UK, if you have to ask for time off or you are seen as a full-time employee by you have to report to a manager, things like that, you are classed as an employee. Even people that work for Uber are classed as employees in this country and they get paid time off, sick pay, a pension. That's the kind of place that America needs to get to.
I mean, that's the thing, though, right? Is we're never going to get there if we don't have unions, because the whole
Yeah,
reason that we're at a
100%.
point where workers are exploited the way they are in my country is because we don't advocate for one another. And that's like exactly what they're talking about here, right? They're saying that, they have come together and built bridges to understand what everyone's unique challenges are, and that everybody has different challenges and are affected by these things in different ways. But that's not what's important. That as a united front, as workers, they can come together and advocate for all of their needs so that everybody gets what they need, right? And like that's the only way that that kind of change that you're talking about ever happens, because yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. That's just how it is here, and it's wrong and it's sick. But as
I
long as you
wonder
can
if
be taken advantage of, you will be.
this stuff reads worse to us, Steve, or to people from the UK that might be listening than to people in America might just be like, "Oh, this sounds like my job. I wish I could unionize." Whereas some of this stuff, I'm just like, how do you not? At my last job, I wasn't able to take sick time, or I had loads of hospital appointments in the space of a year, and I had to use half of my annual leave for this. And I'd always forgotten that that was something because of sort of COVID and working from home for so long. I'd forgotten that wasn't a normal thing, and it was two people like saying to me, "Max, like you don't have any holiday because you had to go to hospital appointments and you couldn't avoid those. You didn't have to take half a day every time you had an hour's doctor's appointment." And I was like, "Oh yeah, I forgot that's not a normal thing that we do." But in America, it
No.
seems like these kind of things just are commonplace.
Oh yeah, dude. Yeah, I mean that's you know, most places like don't guarantee you things like bereavement leave or anything like it's totally up to the discretion of your employer, you know? Um,
Yeah,
so yeah.
all of that is mandated by the government in this country. You get statutory sick pay, so if you're off sick, the government will pay you something. It's not it's not a lot, but at least you get something that you can kind of live on. You'll get bereavement time off. You get maternity and paternity leave guaranteed for up to a year. So there's a lot of provisions that I
Yeah,
think
we
in Europe
we have
we've
none of
come
those
to
things.
expect, and it's kind of alien to us when we hear that that's not commonplace there. Like that, it always makes me wonder. We hear about these unions happening and unionization. Obviously, this has happened in Europe already. We saw that union in France happen, but I wonder if it's less commonplace here, or the need for it is less commonplace here because we have those protections in place already. Obviously, overworking and adequate staffing and things like that is not something that can really be protected by law, and that is something that unions can fight for. But things like, you know, being seen as a full-time employee when you are a full-time employee and getting that status and being able to get bereavement leave and things like that, that's stuff that is
I mean,
protected.
yeah, I mean, like, I don't want to get too in the weeds because, like, again, we have more to talk about here, and it's video games. But yeah, like one of the most famous examples in the world is like I'm sure you're at least both by name familiar with the WWE, right, and the World
Hmm.
Wrestling Entertainment,
Hmm.
and like famously as an organization, they make millions and millions of dollars and have people for their entire careers be treated as independent contractors. But they have to work 5 days a week and be on the road 11 months of the year and all this shit.
Damn,
And like they're not treated as full time employees. They don't get the same benefits as full time employees
that's
when they obviously would need them
crazy.
even more because they put their bodies on the line all the time. If you get hurt, they
Crazy.
can just drop you because you're not a full time employee and they don't owe you shit.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
dude,
did
it's
not know
insane.
that. Oh my
Unless
Yep.
you're John Cena level, and then at that point, they're not going to drop you.
But even that, right? It's like he's now it's the opposite way where he doesn't really work for them anymore, right? Like he's a
No, yeah.
independent, wealthy person, right? Like it's the people that depend on it for their income that are
Hmm.
at jeopardy, right? In the same way that, I'm sure there are plenty of really powerful people at Sega of America who are comfortable.
Yeah,
So
most definitely.
we continue on. Our mission as a union is to attain higher base pay for all, following industry standards with raises tied to the cost of living and inflation, improved stable benefits for all, including healthcare, retirement, remote work opportunities, and more, increased, clearly outlined opportunities for advancement, balanced workloads and schedules, and defined responsibilities for all positions, adequate staffing of departments to end patterns of overwork. Our demands are already in line with Sega's core values. These measures will serve to strengthen our company and improve the quality of the games we produce. As we secure better working conditions for Sega of America, we look forward to continuing to collaborate with Sega branches worldwide. And then this is our last bit here. They say, we at Aegis CWA are proud to unionize alongside our many friends and peers within the gaming industry, and we will protect one another as we journey to make Sega of America a healthier and happier place to work overall. We ask that Sega of America Inc. leadership recognize our democratic right to organize without interference by voluntarily recognizing our union without delay and committing to a policy of neutrality that holds their stated code of conduct to, quote, respect our employees' right to organize for labor management consultations. Signed, Aegis CWA. And then I do just want to call special attention to their logo, which is my favorite thing ever, which is the Sonic Fist. Uh, I love it. I love it. I really, truly love it.
Is
So
that is
yeah,
that like a gold Sonic ring on the outside as well? They should have styled
yeah,
that to be
I
more
yeah.
did
It's
gold
know
this.
that,
Sonic
It's
yeah.
the it's
ring.
the Sonic ring, and it says Allies Employee Guild Improving Sega CWA Local 95110 on the bottom. It's got the Sonic Fist, and Yeah, very,
Yeah.
very
They
cool.
also signed off their tweet thread with "To be this good takes ages," which is just wonderful as well.
Yeah, I think that's great.
I love that.
Yo, their branding is next level.
Oh, yeah. While we're
Yeah.
doing education, I have a quick question. Am I right in saying that unions are not always just company based, right? So like if I was let's say I was a miner, I've just picked that job out of the air.
You're
Yeah, I know
you're
where you're
you're
going.
right. Yeah. So in the UK, Max, we have like the RMT, right? The Railways and Transport Union.
Yeah.
You don't have to work for like a specific railway. It doesn't have to be you work for Sega, so you're in this Sega union. Like the Writers Guild of America is you're just a writer and you join that guild and
Yeah,
you
of course.
become
Again,
like a member of the union.
Steve brought up the SAG-AFTRA Guild, the Screen Actors Guild. That
Yeah,
is
good
also
point.
just you're just a member, right?
Yeah.
I've applied for journalism jobs where I would get AFTRA membership, and it's not tied to the organization. It's just this is a SAG job, you know.
Okay,
It's a
I'm with you.
union protected job.
Right.
So yeah,
But I'd
yeah,
imagine
it's
those jobs have to recognize that union in order for you to get the rights that would come with
benefits.
it, right?
yeah. So
Okay, that makes sense.
my understanding is the reason that video games have done it in this way is because there isn't a broader like video game developers union, which is what would have to happen for what you're talking about to make sense. If like every major, Western studio was like, or like a huge portion of them were like, we are going to create the, video game developers union, and we're gonna, decide that these are the rules by which video game developers operate, right? Um, that would be where you would have a broader conversation in that way. But for years, people have said that doesn't make sense just because game development is so different and jobs are so different and roles are so different and the
No,
culture
I
at a
think
big
it does make
studio and
sense.
I personally, I would love to see it go that direction. I think if it works for SAG, I don't know why it couldn't work for game developers.
It's strange to me because like in the UK we have more we have like specific unions like the transport union, or the railway union, but we also have
We have
like
that too,
general
yeah.
unions like Unite. The Unite are the union for the NHS, but also TGI Fridays. So it's like they're vastly different jobs, but you can join Unite no matter where you work.
That's funny. Yeah, I would love to see that. I really would. I think it would be great to have a broader system in play so that some of the folks that, because again, right, I'm reminded of Jason's second book, Press Reset, which is about studio closures and layoffs and stuff like that, and the idea that like you know, the most vulnerable employees are the folks who are treated as expendable, who are, contract workers who get laid off when a project's done or when times get tough and, whatever. Like those people would, I think, really benefit from a more generalized union where, no matter where you were going and where you were working, you'd be able to be a member of the same union and be supported in
Yeah,
that
like a
in that
QA
way
union,
through
for
those
example,
transitions.
would make sense.
Yeah, and see that's something that I've heard people argue where it's like game development is too broad, but there should be like a game coders and artists and QA, and like that could be a way to do it. Again, I'm not a union expert, so I certainly don't know what the right way to do it is, but I will say, to put a pin in this, I think the folks at Aegis seem to really be doing things right, and it seems like their message seems to be a really positive one, and one that like I'm really happy to see them coming together and pushing. So yeah, absolutely a huge shout out to the folks over at Aegis, and good luck. And like I said, there is power in a union, so you've got our support.
Yeah, we hope you get what you deserve. Which
Absolutely.
sounds backhanded, that does, but I do
Yeah,
mean
that sounds really bad. Like, hope you get
Yeah.
what you deserve.
Hope
Hope
you
you'll
get what you
fired.
deserve.
That's what it's really
Yeah.
sad.
Not what it's because of my throat. That's
All right, quick, Max, on my mark. All right, gang. So we've got a lot more show ahead of us here in just a minute. But let me remind you, before we get into the rest of it, that this episode of the FlipScreen Games Podcast is brought to you by our Patreon producers for the month of April. They are, of course, Arnold J. Rimmer, Christopher Valens, Earth Visitor, Gabriel Hasselmeyer, aka Sobi, Snackago, Ty the Dude, and Waka Hula. Thank you all so much for your support over on patreon.com/FlipScreenGames. You are the reals to the real, and we greatly appreciate your support of this and all of our sister shows. If you want to go and show your support just like they did, get your name read on the air, get the show early, get a bunch of other cool perks and goodies, you can head over to patreon.com/FlipScreenGames and show your support at any old level over there. It's the best way to show your support. Keep the mics and the lights on, as it were. But of course, if you don't have any money for us, there's a bunch of ways you can get involved and support the show without spending a nickel. Head over to flipscreen.games. That's our website where you will find links to all the places we are all over the web, our Patreon, our Discord, our email address. You want to write into the show for our question block, however you choose to get involved. We thank you for tuning in for another episode of the FlipScreen Games Podcast. Let's get back into it. Guerrilla Games has seemingly confirmed a third Horizon game. I didn't know that this was news. You know, of course, Horizon 2, Horizon Forbidden West just came out, both of which heavily setting up a sequel. But of course, at some point, you got to confirm what we all know, I guess, right? And seemingly, that's what we've got here.
Now, I had no idea that the game or the DLC or whatever it is you hinted out there heavily suggests there's going to be a sequel.
Oh,
Is
yeah.
this like me? Have I put in this document here confirm third Matrix movie? Is that what I've put in here? Is that basically
Kind of, yeah. Like, I mean,
Right.
it's news that it's confirmed for sure, and
Okay.
obviously there is a grander story that they're shuffling things around, and people have got new jobs over at Gorilla that we'll go into details. But yeah, it very much is that if you go and play, especially Burning Shores, that seems like kind of a prequel to what would be Horizon 3.
More
Um,
fool me.
at
But
least
yeah,
from
you
what I've
know,
heard. I haven't played. I don't know if you've dug into Burning Shores yet, Pete.
I have. I've started it. I'm enjoying it. I am early in, so I don't have super developed thoughts. Because I believe it's about 6 to 8 hours, and I'm probably about an hour and a half in. I'm like right past the beginning. I'm kind of in the first area, getting all my side quests, all that good stuff.
Can we like quickly talk about that? Because I kind of want to
Sure.
know initial impressions of Burning Shores. And did you suffer the same issue I had with I think I can't remember what was it called, Frozen something, where I went
Frozen
back to the
Wilds.
game and I had no idea how to play it anymore. Did you suffer any of that, or does this DLC do a better job of things?
A little of both, because I think the DLC does a better job of kind of being like, just in case you were away, you remember how to play? And it's like, yeah, I got it. But what I was struggling with is, and I'll say this, right? We've got the third episode of the Persona 5 Royal Game Club. We just recorded this past weekend. It's going to be out in just a few days. I promised you the next episode would be on time, and I swear to God it will be. But I've been playing Persona 5 the last couple days quite a bit on my Steam Deck, and you know, like when you're switching between games and you get in that like, I know what the controls are, but like in the moment, I'm doing the muscle memory of like the wrong thing. I found myself
Yes.
doing
You know,
that.
it's even worse when I go from like Nintendo to Xbox or Nintendo
Yes.
to Steam Deck, because I've been playing Switch and Steam Deck this last week, and
Yeah.
I swap those A and B buttons around in my head so many times. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, and it's like it's less even that I'm like making the button prompt mistakes of being like, oh, it's A and I'm pressing the wrong button, as much as it is like, so I'm playing Horizon, right? And in Horizon, R2 is like how you shoot, right? Like, but in Persona, that's sprint, right? So I'm like, oh, like, right, I gotta press the stick, and like I keep having moments where I'm like, okay, like somebody's coming at me and I want to like dodge, and instead of pressing the dodge roll button, I like jump, and like, and then I just jump up and they hit me and I
Yeah.
die, and stupid stuff like that, where I'm just like, like
The
I
worst moment I had the worst moment I had for that was with Breath of the Wild and the original Horizon. Like I was playing
yeah.
Breath of the Wild all the time, and then I played a bit of Horizon. I jumped off of like a
Yes.
cliff or something, expecting to have a glider, and Aloy just fell to her death.
Dude, so I remember so vividly, like when those games came out, right? Like, I was super into both of them. I was like going back and forth between them pretty aggressively. And I was like my ex at the time, whenever I would stay at her place, I would usually be playing like my Switch, and I was like playing Horizon at home. And then like I remember sometimes bringing the PlayStation back and forth. So I was like constantly switching off which I was playing. And I so vividly remember when I decided I was going to pause playing Breath of the Wild and finish Horizon, and it was exactly that, where I just ran and jumped off a cliff and was like, I'm too tired for this. I gotta stop playing two games at once.
I've been playing Breath of the Wild recently, just like dribs and drabs, just sort of like get back into the swing of it and sort of remind
Yeah.
myself again. And I constantly am just like, oh no, he's get away, crouch, and I'll just like be crouching
Yes.
for like, okay, great, okay, and then I'll be like, oh, I need to run away, and I'll just jump in the air, like, great, okay, cool, that's not that button.
I was having that problem because like the jump and action, like they're totally opposite, right? Like
Yeah.
jump in Breath of the Wild is Y, and it's
Yeah.
it's
You
X
can
in
swap that
Horizon.
though. There's a setting to swap it in that game, which I appreciate.
Yeah,
I
but then
never
I'm
did because
gonna.
I was just like, the game wants me to use this button to run.
That's
so
how
I'm
I
gonna
play
Yeah.
most
use this
things.
button to
Yeah,
run.
Yeah,
just like
I'll
this is
have
the
to
right
learn.
way.
Yeah, like I'm like I know, like when it's like people say, "Oh, Monster Hunter's really hard to play because the control scheme." It's like that's the way the game wants me to play. I'm not going to go around and change anything to make it easier. I'm going to learn this completely ass backwards control scheme if it kills me. And then by the
Cuphead
time I
is
do
like
it, I'm
the
like, "Oh, this makes perfect sense. I absolutely understand why they did it this way. I could not imagine this any other way."
I think Cuphead's one of the only games I commit to playing a different way.
How do you
I
play
put the
Cuphead?
Oh
dash on a
yeah,
different
swap into the
button.
trigger.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's like I can't press all these face buttons at the same time, you know? Like it's
Mhm.
like I gotta shoot and dash at the same time. Just give me the dash on one of the bumpers. It's so much easier, you know?
Oh, this is where the claw comes in.
It's true. It's true. Go listen to the Steam Deck podcast the last 2 weeks. We've been talking all about that claw life. So anyway, to pull it back in here, the blog post that they
Oh yeah, the
posted
news.
was talking. Yeah, right. The news. It's a post with a couple things, right? It's announcing that Guerrilla's studio director and executive producer Angie Smets has just been promoted to the head of development strategy at PlayStation Studios, which is really cool. This is like the second major promotion from Guerrilla, right? Like obviously Herman Hulst
Yeah, that's like
was a
wow,
Guerrilla guy.
Herman, just a bit of nepotism. You're just only hiring from Gorilla. I see how it
He
is.
knows she does good work, you know? They're taking over up there. But yeah, and then they talked a little bit about like what's coming up for the future of the studio, and they kind of close it out where they say we have full confidence in our new leadership as they steer Guerrilla towards a bright future, expanding the world of Horizon with Aloy's next adventure and our exciting online project. And I think, like I said, ribbingly at the top, but we ended up getting down a rabbit hole with it. I think Horizon 3 was kind of a foregone conclusion, but there are some interesting questions there, I think, anyway. And the one that's like on top of mind for me is this a PlayStation 5 game? Because I don't think it is, right? Like,
Surely not.
Yeah.
If we're saying
Yeah.
6 years, let's say 6 years like the last two, the PlayStation 5 is already 3 years old at this point, which is the fact that we're possibly halfway through a generation of the PlayStation 5 is very, very funny. But yeah, there's no way that if we do 6 years, this is coming out on a PS5. It might not even release on a PS5 Pro. It might just purely be a PS6 game. We don't know by this point, but
yeah, I guess it could be like cross generation, but like I wouldn't be surprised if it was like a maybe like a PS6 launch title or something.
Mhm.
I don't know about that. I kind of feel like they're gonna do a smaller title, like the little Miles Morales thing. Because yes, they've said it's Aloy's next adventure. We don't know if that's gonna be like it could be another game. It could be it could be like another DLC for Horizon Forbidden
I
West, or it
guess
could be like
I
a
don't
little mini game.
I don't know though, because it's like I feel like three or I don't know. I maybe you're right, but like that's the trajectory they had with the first one, and I wouldn't be surprised if they followed that of like proper release, DLC a year later, and then we shift gears fully to production on the next one. But you could be
I
right.
have a feeling that we're gonna see this on PS5, and I also have a feeling that this generation is gonna go a lot longer than previous generations. It feels like, yeah, we're 3 years in, but still feels like we're only now just getting exclusives, like Burning Shores is a PS5 exclusive, but we've not
Yeah,
really
but
seen that before, and I kinda could see this becoming a similar situation, even if it does launch on PS6, a similar situation to Forbidden West, where it's like a split cross-platform, cross-generation game, but with the rumors that PS5 Pro is coming next year, I think they could potentially have something ready, something big to launch that system with. And that's if the PS5 Pro rumors are true. They could
I
be
mean, I think you're
completely
right.
false.
I don't think it's more Horizon. You know, the idea of like another DLC a year from now. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I don't know that I see that, you know, especially knowing that there are all these other Horizon projects in development, right? Like they mention our exciting online project, right? And there was like that multiplayer build that leaked back in January that we were talking about before we hopped online here. And it's like we know that there's other stuff coming from the world of Horizon, and I wouldn't be surprised if the goal is to like, you know, like let's focus in on, you know, on 3 and on really, you know, like closing out the original trilogy in a strong way.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean,
Because
it's also possible that this is another VR game, and they explore that side of things, and we get like another Call of the Mountain style thing with
they
Aloy. We
didn't
get a
make that though.
DLC for that.
I
They
doubt that
they
that would be
worked on
them.
it, like,
Yeah.
I think they heavily assisted. I don't know, I mean, depends how big the team is on the online game that they're working, which there was a leak in January about that, and it looks like, Horizon crossed with Fortnite and Genshin Impact. From the screenshots, it did not excite me, but
No,
obviously it's a very
doesn't
early
look
build
great.
from 2020 that showed off. I kind of really wanted it to be like a Monster Hunter World situation where it looked like Horizon and it was gorgeous and beautiful and like
I think
I
it's
went
going
and
to be
explored and things.
I think it's going to be that kind of game, but I think it's stylistically. I mean, if these screenshots are, you know, the direction it's headed, it'll probably be more akin to like Monster Hunter Rise, where it's that kind of game, but like a little bit more of a, you know, cartoony kind of feel and something
Yeah, I
that's
feel
like a
like
little cheaper to produce.
it has to be a Monster Hunter style thing, considering when the game was first revealed. I think a lot of the discussion around it was, okay, you know, how much like Monster Hunter is this going to be? Obviously, we now know 6 years down the line that's not the case at all, but it does very much lend itself to that sort of like hunting a monster. You know, how do you tackle this specific robot? Having that in a four-player thing would be fantastic, I think.
Yeah, I could definitely see that being really fun, like as
Yeah.
a multiplayer experience with a friend.
Mhm.
Yeah, I can. I just think visually for me, I would have loved it to be the kind of level of fidelity we're seeing from something like Burning Shores. They also spoke about the fact that they've got a new technical director who's focusing on the future of the Decima engine. I'd love to see that.
That engine rules.
It really does, and it scales so well as well. Like
Yo.
I've been playing Death Stranding, the weirdest fucking game in history, on Steam Deck, and it runs so well on like this like hardware that is in no way the same level of power as like a PS4 or PS5, and it runs so well. Whereas you look at something like The Last of Us, and it's a disaster over on PC.
You gotta play uh the Forbidden Shore. What is it? Forbidden Shores?
Burning Shores,
Burning
yeah.
Shores. Forbidden West. Burning Shores. Got it. You
It's
got to
on
play
my
Burning
list.
Shores
It's on my list to play. Yeah,
because you
I
remember
do
we
plan
talked
on it.
about I will talk about it maybe next week when I finish it and maybe you can start it and I'd love to get your thoughts on it because I know you talked a lot about the whole like why is this PS5 exclusive and you
Oh,
know
they've
like
shown enough. Like even just the skies with the volumetric clouds was
uh-huh.
enough to make it a
Mhm.
PS5 only game.
And just like the map layout, I'm like, oh yeah, no, I get this. Like this feels like it's built for this tech. But I do just want to push back on something you guys said earlier, which is the idea of that like the insanity of us already being this far into the generation, and that means that this generation is going to be longer or whatever. We've talked about this before, and I just think it's important to bring up. We are on the exact same trajectory that the PS4 was. Max, let me
We
ask you this
are,
question.
but look
No,
back at the
hold on,
P
Steve. Hold
but
on.
look back
I
at the
want
PS3 generation, and we've spoken about it ad nauseum. That generation went so long. partially because of the recession, and I think we're
Correct.
going to replicate that same trajectory.
Yeah,
I want to hear what
and
Pete had to say. I want
I
to
think
hear he activated
I,
me.
I got a game for you. Yeah, I think you're right
All
about
right.
that, Steve. I think there's a real chance of that being the case. But I do just want to add this context. I want to ask you this, Max. When you think PS4, what do you think of as being like the first significant exclusive game on PS4?
Significant exclusive for, as in, for me personally, or for the?
For the
Because I would
console.
say, okay,
It's
I would
next too.
say,
Come on.
And that
yeah,
and that's
for the
only on
console.
PS4. That was not cross console.
I want to say it's either Bloodborne or it's Uncharted for
4.
4.
For a Thief's
Yeah,
End. So
yeah,
thank
2016.
you very much. I appreciate those answers, and they exactly prove my point. So those games came out, and again, I'm not saying this is like a gotcha thing. I know you're on the same page as me on this, Steve.
Oh, so you just
They
got
came
through
out.
me.
No. It's just for example. I'm just using
Okay,
you to make a
all right.
point. You've done nothing wrong. It came out in 2015, March 2015, right? We are on that
Mhm.
exact same trajectory now. We are 2
Yeah,
years
it
into
did
the
come out in
PlayStation
March
5's life cycle.
2015, but like the PS4 came out in Japan in 2014, so that's like a year into that generation for Japan.
But it came out in the States in 2013, didn't it?
Yeah, in November. So
crazy?
you're looking at
Yeah.
a year and a half for like for a big game. I feel like we've not reached that stage. Not just on PlayStation. I think on Xbox either. We're nowhere near that point. And I think it's fueled a lot by Unreal Engine and the fact that Unreal Engine 5 is only really just shipping games. The fact that
Yeah.
Epic only just shipped Fortnite in Unreal Engine 5. It's their
But
first game that they've built in Unreal Engine 5.
And I think you're right about that. But I just want to say, I mean, I would argue, I think the PS5 has had a better library from launch till now than the
I would
PlayStation
agree with
4 on
that.
that same exact timeline.
But I
There
think that's
have been
because
significant exclusives already.
I think it's because the architecture was the same as the PS4, and it wasn't like, oh, we've gone from this weird like 3-chip engine that no one really knew how to program for the PS3, and we went from a PowerPC system to x86 over on the Xbox side. Like they were able to do cross-gen a lot better than they've ever been able to before because the architecture was identical, and it's literally just this is just a more powerful version. It's essentially just a little mini PC that's underneath your TV.
Yeah, no doubt. But I mean, I think it stands with what we're talking about, right? Where it's like, I don't think that um, I think the narrative that the PS5 generation is stunted in this way and that it's like, oh, I can't believe we're already halfway through it. Like, as if this wasn't the exact same situation, more or less, with its predecessor, which everybody can now, in hindsight, look at as being one of the most successful console generations of all time. And that, like, if you were asked to make a top 10 list of exclusives, you'd have no trouble making a list of bona fide classics, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Well, my point is though, I don't think we're halfway through this generation. I think
I agree with you.
it's
Yeah.
it's gonna be way longer than 6 or 7 years at this point.
But I
Like
don't
it
know
really
about way longer because it's like, I don't know, like, I mean, maybe, but like,
But depending on how powerful the PS5 Pro is, and if Xbox decide to do a mid-gen refresh as well, I could see that extending the life cycle of this generation pretty significantly because at that point, you make the base system run games at 30 frames per second, while the Pro versions can run them at 60, or the Pro versions get enhanced, improved ray tracing, but the base systems don't. I just
yeah.
looking at though. You look at like AMD's chip lineup and roadmap. I don't know what they put in there. I don't know when we've got another chip for these systems to switch over to. Looking at their roadmap, but they might have something under wraps that they're working on, like they did for Steam Deck.
Yeah, I don't know, but it's
I
interesting.
think I'm with you on it not being the I don't think the generation is sorry, it's halfway through. Just based on, previous previous lengths, I guess. I tell you what does
The
excite me
last
about
two
this game.
generations have trended longer than what was the average prior to that, right? Like,
That makes
it used
sense.
to be like 5 or 6 years, but the last
Mhm.
two were like 8 or 9 or 7, you know?
That makes sense. Tell you what does excite me most about this, as someone who's not a big Horizon fan, I'm very excited for the high 90s Metacritic game that speaks to me that comes out just before Horizon does. Really cannot wait to play
Oh
that.
yeah, Elden Ring 2's gonna launch at the same
Yeah,
time, isn't it? Yeah.
the generation-defining game that launches just as this did, that I am gonna absolutely fucking adore. I know
Yeah, I know it's gonna be great, isn't it? Always
Can't
happens.
wait.
You know
Can't
what
wait.
though? I've got a question for you, Pete, before we
Hit me.
move on. Does this not really upset you? Because I know how much of a Killzone fan you are.
See, now, Max, you made a joke earlier, right, about how the innocuous statement you think you make one time becomes a running joke. I can't live down the idea that I hate Killzone, when in reality, I'm pretty sure all I said was like, does anybody really care about Killzone, like, compared to
Damn, I
Horizon?
can't believe you
Like,
went for Killzone so
He
hard.
slacked
so
off the Vita
Asobi
once
and the
as well.
Killzone community came for me, okay? They
Yeah.
are out there. There are dozens of them. I don't, those
They all
sickos.
Pete-
love their first-person shooters that do nothing to separate themselves from it. They love it. They love it.
Pete once said something bad about the Vita as well. I never lived that down. That was
I
funny.
did not. I never
You
said
did.
something bad
I
about the
no, I
Vita.
remember
What did I
everyone was
say?
coming for you, like talking about how the Vita was great and stuff, and then you had to like show them your fucking
Did
Vita.
Pete
on the
apologize?
next
Did Pete
episode.
publicly apologize?
What did
Yeah.
I even say? I don't even remember what it was.
You probably said something like you didn't have a great collection of games or something.
Or,
I think it was-
or that like the proprietary memory was done the obvious shit that wasn't good about it, and everyone's like, "Oh, the Vita's great." I know, motherfucker. I have one, and it's with me right now, always. It's right there. I can point at it. It's across the room.
Yeah, nice
Where's
little
your Vita?
paperweight. When did you last turn it on?
Like a year ago. All right, before we got our Steam Decks, but whatever. How much plays yours getting, audience? Like, let me see your Vita hours. Motherfuckers. Anyway.
Oh,
We're
just
gonna
berate
close
the audience.
things-
Just berate the
What's up?
audience. Just berate the audience.
I'll fight the
That's
audience.
great.
I will.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing. I love the audience. The audience loves me, but what they love about me is my authenticity. And when they come at the king, they better come correct. And if they're going to come with these ticky-tacky fouls and try to call me out like I don't love the Vita, or like, it's just, come
Put it
on.
this
Like,
way,
am I a
Pete-
PlayStation
Pete loves
fanboy or
the
am I not?
audience.
Pick a lane. Pick a lane.
Pete loves the audience as much as he loves the Vita and Killzone, and you can interpret that in any way you want.
And that is open to interpretation. Don't say that I love them as much as Killzone. That's a dig, because I nothing Killzone. I definitely don't nothing the audience.
Yeah, so you wouldn't be happy if they announced a new Killzone? I'd love Gorilla to do a new IP at some point. Like, let's close out the Aloy
At some
story
point,
and
they
do
just
something
started
new.
a new IP. It's like they didn't even finish the trilogy yet.
Not really. Like,
What do you mean?
I would have loved the online project to be something fresh and not them just because this is what they always seem to do. It's like, oh, we became the Killzone studio. Now we're becoming the Horizon studio. At what point do they kind of diversify? Because you look at, say, Naughty Dog, for example.
What,
They
the
were
Last
like,
of Us studio?
we've got but the Naughty Dog were like, oh, we're the Uncharted studio. But we're not going to make Uncharted 4. We're going to go and make a different game. We're going to go make The Last of Us. I'd love Guerrilla to just do that and like boot up a second team, develop a fresh IP alongside Horizon team.
I'd like for them to do another IP. I also think I just balked because you're like, oh, come on, make a new IP already. They just made their first new IP in like the entire history of their fucking
I know,
studio.
yeah, I know. But like, do you know what I mean? Though they become the Horizon studio, and that's what they become. And I feel like you know, same as Sony Santa Monica is the God of War studio, but they're seemingly working.
But now they're working on something else.
Yeah.
But that's the thing is, I kind of think I feel like that's what you do after 3. You finish Aloy's trilogy, and then you move on to something else, and you let Horizon continue to exist in the background, and maybe you tell side stories, or you have an ongoing multiplayer game, or you let another studio tell a new story with a new character in a different country, right? Like, there's that whole, that group that you meet in West, and then they come up in the DLC that, like, they sailed over from Europe, right? Like, what's up?
Oh my God.
I'd love to go see
I have been dying for a Fallout game set in another country. Like, the Americana thing is cool, but I'm kind of done with that. I want to know what's going on in Europe, or what's going on in China. What was the
I was
war
going to
all
say,
about?
I want to see in China. That's the other half of the war. What happened over there?
Yeah.
Because, like, I got to imagine, like, Europe in the Fallout universe is, like, relatively back to normal at this point.
Yeah, but wouldn't you love to know that? Like,
I would.
oh,
I
what
would.
happened in Europe? Like, and then we're seeing on the news that America's still completely fucked. Like, I would love to find out what else is going on in that universe.
Or like I would love to go to like Africa. Like imagine going in the Serengeti and like seeing like what does a mutated fucking elephant look
Yeah.
like? What's a mutated giraffe look like? Like let's get some of the biggest, scariest animals on the world and turn them into monsters. Like that'd be kind of cool, you know?
Oh yeah.
I'm like, I don't know. You could do some crazy shit with that. I would love to like find a group of super mutants that are like out there living in the fucking, like living amongst like mutated lions and they're out there riding them and they've got this like crazy like fucking desert, because like obviously we've seen a lot of desert and Fallout, but like, you can do some new stuff with it.
Oh yeah, you absolutely
Yeah.
could. And like, I think the mutations and stuff that happened there, and seeing what kind of civilization
Or like Australia.
What?
There's all kinds of weird
Australia.
animals
I
in
wanna go-
Australia.
Or not even that. Like, think about the fucking pyramids. What do they look like in Egypt? What happened there? Like, I would love to
Yeah.
find out. Are the mummies like alive from the radioactivity and shit?
Or like, what do the people that are left think of those things, right? Like, what do they think the pyramids were for, right? Like stuff like that. Like, they probably think they're a lot younger than they actually are. Like, you could do because like that's the fun of that universe is like in New Vegas, like that cult that like worships Elvis and shit like that. It's like that's hilarious. Like I want to see.
Oh
more
yeah,
shit
and
like
that,
that.
and the whole Kaiser thing. You know, they all
Sure.
all love Caesar.
Yeah. But anyway, I'm excited for more Horizon. But there's another series, another burgeoning IP from across the fence over at Xbox that we all got excited for this year, and that of course is Hi-Fi Rush. And there's some controversy about it this week. Is it a success? Is it a failure? We can't seem to agree. So Jeff Grubb over on, I believe it was the Giant Bombcast, I think was where this originated.
I think it was his
memory serves.
Games Mess something.
The Games Mess show. Okay.
Games Mess show,
Apologies.
yeah.
So Jeff broke this story originally where he stated that he had heard that Hi-Fi Rush, quote unquote, didn't make the money it needed to make. And then that, of course, blew up, right? As anything that Jeff Grubb says he heard does. Everybody reports it quite widely. And, it people ran with it. And then Aaron Greenberg, who is, of course, VP of Microsoft, replied and issued a correction, which in which he said, Hi-Fi Rush was a breakout hit for us and our players in all key measurements and expectations. We couldn't be happier with what the team at Tango Gameworks delivered with this surprise release. And then, just to give you a little context, the game was announced recently that it had reached 2 million players, right? Which, I think a lot of people looked at as a pretty big win, considering the game was shadow dropped, no significant marketing up front, new IP, totally different style of game from the studio, a thing that could conceivably have a lot going against it. And it hit. It sold really well on Steam the first couple days.
Yep.
I think, unfortunately, it feels as if the conversation has slowed quite a bit there. And, maybe that's, I don't know, for a smaller game like this, does that matter? Who's to say? But
I think we have had a lot of releases though. We have had a lot of things also come out of nowhere. We've had Metroid Prime Remastered was sort of dropped and came out of nowhere, and people weren't expecting some things like, I don't know, Resident Evil 4 or Dead Space to sort of take off the way they did and be as sort of well received as they were. So I feel like, yeah, it's probably had like the legs probably haven't been as good overall. But I think by the end of the year, when it comes to time to discuss what games we really liked this year, I think it's just going to come up again because a lot of people were saying like they were so surprised by this game, and I'm personally looking forward to trying to get it finished and sort of playing more of this.
So
I
Jeff
agree.
clarified his position on this afterwards on Twitter. He said, I was just trying to say that I heard Hi-Fi Rush didn't make the money it was expected to make. But to be clear, I don't really know how Microsoft measures success. It was just a small passing statement in a larger conversation. It wasn't meant to make people worry about Hi-Fi Rush. I shouldn't have said needed on the podcast. I don't know what it needed to do. The conversation we were having was about generating revenue, and the game didn't hit that target. But no matter what, Hi-Fi Rush isn't a flop, and Tango's future is bright. So
I also think it's worth pointing out that, we all podcast, right? So it's very easy to say something in passing and have it getting taken out of context like that. So I certainly
Pete hates the Vita, so it's fine.
Exactly. I hate the Vita and Killzone, right? As we said. So I certainly don't think Jeff was trying to like misrepresent anything. I think it's just how he was speaking. But also, I don't think that what either of them said is mutually exclusive. The idea that the game underperformed financially, but otherwise was a success by all of the metrics that Microsoft deems important for this stage of their strategy, where they're trying to grow the install base and subscriber numbers of Game Pass, makes sense to me. The idea that, like, hey, we wanted the game to make this amount of money and it didn't make that much money, but it was a critical darling and it increased subs and people played it and blah, 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 blah. We're going to greenlight a sequel. Yeah, like,
Plus, it got
you could
so
still
much
look at it as
hype
a
around
success
it,
and
right?
still have a problem with it, like,
Yeah, I think you can look at it as a success because it got people talking about the fact that Xbox was back. Here we go. We're finally getting fresh, new
especially this
exclusives
year. Are
to
you kidding me?
Xbox.
That's the
Yeah.
only win they've had all year. This year's
Mhm.
been nothing but L's for Xbox, except Hi-Fi Rush.
Yeah, and it was an experimental marketing strategy, I think, with the Shadow drop and not even having ever spoken about the game and it being a total surprise, and then just dropped the game on Game Pass that day and also on Steam, and it was shot straight up to the number one on the Steam charts like that day.
I mean, especially when you consider that Tango had like just put a game out, like Tokyo, or Ghostwire Tokyo is like what, only
Yeah.
like
It
A
was
year
a year
before.
old at that
Yeah.
point.
just barely though, right? Like
Yeah.
maybe not even a full year old at that point. Like when it did drop, it's nuts. Like I think it was kind of an unpredictable strategy, and I mean it clearly worked in a number of ways, right? Whether or not it had the financial return that it might have had or that they might have wanted it to have. I think that's kind of a different question than what their real goal is, right? We've been talking for years about how the goal isn't to sell games, it's to sell Game Pass. And
Well, I mean, we don't know that because obviously Jeff said he doesn't know how they measure success. They obviously did have some level of financial target that they were looking for. And I think that's just general
sure,
business sense is we're putting this game out. It cost us X to make. We'd love to make Y from it. And that's the
of
target
course.
we're aiming for. Whether it hits that or not, I think is a different matter. We've heard from Phil Spencer on multiple occasions talking about the fact that they can make these smaller titles like a Hi-Fi Rush, like a Pentiment, because it bolsters up Game Pass and it gets people subscribing to Game Pass. And I don't think those games would have been made if it was just an independent publisher these days. I don't think a
Yeah.
game like Pentiment gets created and then finds a publisher in the same way. You look at how Obsidian had to crowdfund Pillars of Eternity in order to get that off the ground. It was the game they wanted to make, but they couldn't find a publisher for it. I think the same thing would have happened for Pentiment. It seems like that game was in development for a long time. Hi-Fi Rush was clearly a massive departure for Tango from The Evil Within and from a Ghostwire Tokyo. So I think that game probably wouldn't have been greenlit either. I mean, maybe I'm totally wrong on that. It could be that this game was in development far before the Microsoft acquisition, and that Bethesda greenlit it ages ago, and it was just a smaller title they were going to put out. But it seems like the perfect kind of game that they need, those smaller titles that they can then hit that target that they've spoken about before of having a new game every quarter on Game Pass to get you to keep subscribing, keep coming back, and keep playing games on Xbox.
Yeah, and I think I guess that's kind of what I'm getting at with the idea of like, yeah, I'm sure you're right that there is an internal metric there for like a financial return that they may have missed. But in Greenberg's statement, right, he says it was a breakout hit for us and our players in all key measurements and expectations. I think key measurements and expectations is an interesting qualifier because that doesn't say that it exceeded all expectations. So the idea that maybe they wanted it to sell more retail copies on Steam or on Xbox, right? For folks that like don't have Game Pass or whatever. But yeah, I mean the idea that like, yeah, okay, maybe we didn't sell as many copies as we'd hoped, but 2 million people downloaded it and played it. Maybe they were only expecting 1 million, right? Like
Yeah.
maybe that was their idea of success, or maybe they were like, we're going to shadow drop this and hope that it is somewhat successful versus this was the only game anybody was talking about for like a week and a half.
Yeah,
You can't
it's
even
not
say
like
that
the
about
game.
Pentiment, which was a
Yeah.
huge success.
It's not even like the game doesn't exist anymore. It's not like they can't put it on sale on Steam or release some DLC and it doesn't pick up again and things start happening again.
Or put out a Hi-Fi Rush 2.
Yeah, this isn't the end of the game. This isn't the end of the IP. This isn't the end of the journey for the game. And I feel like it's I think we do put too much stock in how a game does in its first month or 2 months. But I also think that's because companies will say, "Hey, and this week we sold this many copies," and it's like God of War or Pokemon, and it's huge. Whereas when a game like this comes out, and we're like, "Hey, in a couple of months we got 2 million. We're really happy with that." People are like,
I
"Dead
I
game.
think
Who's even playing this
it's
game anymore?"
I think for multiplayer, it makes more sense that you want that buzz and that hype at the beginning to get people in. But I
Yeah,
also think traditionally, in terms of marketing, you've put all your eggs in that basket for that launch day. You've got all the ads going. You've spent all this money. You kind of want to recuperate that as quick as possible. I think The Last of Us on PC and the Cyberpunk launches that were just disastrous are a prime example of that. It gets people, you don't want that negative attention. You want people excited to play the game. You want people in there buying it, because otherwise they're just like, okay, I'll wait till it's patched, and I'll buy it on sale, and you lose out on that revenue that you potentially would have got right out the gate, right up front, that you might be relying on as a business to bolster up that quarter's profits or that quarter's revenue.
Yeah, and I guess it's hard when it comes to that stuff because we know that the metrics by which we gauge Xbox's success are different than everyone else's because of what
yeah,
they're trying to do, and they literally must have the loss mindset right now, right? Of like we don't need to make money. We're not making investments to make money now. We're making money to make money 5, 10, 15, 20,
yeah.
30, 50 years from now, right? And like that's the gamble they're making is like we're going to invest billions so we can make trillions, And it's like I I've been saying since the beginning that I thought that was a risky venture and I mean, I don't know cuz for the last couple of years it's felt like Microsoft can do no wrong and Xbox is on a roll and blah. But like this year has been the year of like well, what are the fruits of these acquisitions and what has actually
Yeah,
happened from
we're
all
not
these seeds that
seeing
they've
it.
sown and I I don't know, right? So like I hope that what Aaron Greenberg's saying here is right, and they do look at this game as a success because to me, that's the only success they've had is these smaller indie titles that have bubbled up on Game Pass has been the reason to have Game Pass for me more often than not. I have played some big AAA games there that I've enjoyed, sure, and I really liked Halo Infinite at launch, but like a lot of their bigger tentpole games are like not hitting as much as the smaller stuff. So I hope they do look at it that way and that they look at these things as lifeblood for Game Pass and keeping people on the hook. Because if there weren't these kind of games all the time, I might be more inclined to let my subscription lapse from time to time. Because
Well, yeah, I mean, the only reason I had mine for a while was because of Persona 5. I wasn't really playing anything else over there, and it's a real shame. I mean, I think there are still a bunch of good third party titles, but man,
it's an
it has
incredible
been
library for sure. But
yeah,
you
but it's
want new
been
stuff. You want
dry
hot
when it
stuff.
comes. Yeah, it's been dry when it comes to first party stuff in this last year. Really, the last big first party game I played was Forza Horizon 5, and that was a 2021 game, and that's really bad. Like, I should be excited to play a new game on my Xbox. I've invested hundreds of pounds in, and I'm spending, you know, 10 plus pounds a month on a subscription, but there's been nothing.
Redfall 30 FPS though, Steve. Don't worry, it's coming.
Yeah, and I really hope that when we see Starfield in June, that it alleviates all my concerns, and I see it, and I'm blown away at the Starfield Direct, and I'm just
I
like,
want
yeah,
them to shut us
this
up.
is the game. Yeah,
You
that's what
know,
I want as well. In the same way that
Oh,
I
yeah.
think Nintendo did the same thing with the Breath of the Wild presentation. It was just like, oh, is it really going to be any good? Like, it's on Wii U, it's stuck there. It's just like, no, shut up. This game's phenomenal, and I
I'd
want the same thing to happen with
or like
Starfield.
the Switch presentation, right? Where you're like,
Yeah.
okay, whatever.
I'd
Yeah,
love to give a shit
fuck you.
about
You were right.
Starfield.
I'm right.
I would love to give a shit about Starfield. I would love if they gave me a reason to care about that game, and I'm desperate that they do because, you know, I have always been like, "Oh, I play my games everywhere. I own a PlayStation, I own a PC, I own a Switch. Never owned an Xbox. I've never had a reason to own an Xbox, and currently, I've barely got a reason to even subscribe to Game Pass. I only did it for, like, a little bit when, um, Hi-Fi Rush came out, and then, like, I let it lapse because I was like, "Yeah, I'm not really playing this right now, and I don't wanna give Microsoft money for something I don't use because they're not giving me, like, the value personally for me yet. I
I
want them
think
to give me that
that's
value."
totally fine. I also think you're one of the unique people that
Thank you.
is really just like PC centric, and I don't think you have any need to buy an Xbox because you
Mhm.
know day and date that Microsoft's games are coming to PC anyway.
Yeah.
It was a different strategy to PlayStation. I would not be surprised if we saw PlayStation follow that same suit at some point, but for now, it seems like they're sticking with the at least a year later
Yeah.
strategy.
Which is working, obviously.
Yeah, working really good for The Last of Us.
So yeah, I think this year is going to be a really interesting one for Xbox, and I think at the end of this year we are either going to have the kind of air right now around Xbox is I think either going to be like uh cleared and we're going to be like cool. Like they had it. It took a while to percolate, but we're here, we're in the era. It's off to the races. We're good to
Yeah.
go. Or we're going to double down on this fear and it's going to be like, "Uh-oh."
Well, and by the time this podcast comes out, the news may have already broken. We don't know if it's happening on Tuesday or Wednesday, and the CMA is going to give their final findings as to whether the acquisition of Activision Blizzard's allowed to go through. We'll have to wait and see what happens there.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a big week for Xbox news, I'll tell you what. So we will leave it at that for now. And of course, we will be right here for you next week with updates on this and anything else going on in the wild, wide world of video games. So remember, if you want to write in with your thoughts on anything we discussed today or at any point on the show, or if you want to write in with your own question to start a conversation on the show, remember, you can hit us over at questions@flipscreen.games. You can come join our Discord where the conversation keeps rolling between episodes. Or you can head over to FlipScreen.games where you can find links to all that and a lot more, including our Patreon, where you can go and become a Patreon supporter, get your name read on the air, get the show early, whole bunch of other good perks and goodies. However you choose to show your support, we thank you for spending your time with us here on another episode of the FlipScreen Games Podcast. For the crew, I've been Pete. He's been Max. He's been Steve. We'll see you next week.